Demons and Anti-Heroes in Indian Mythology. Part 1. Ravana, the villain who read the Vedas. Ravana stands as one of the most compelling figures in Indian mythology, a demon king who embodies both terrifying power and profound wisdom. He is often remembered as the chief antagonist of the Ramayana, the abductor of Sita, and the arrogant ruler of Lanka who dared to challenge Rama, an avatar of Vishnu. Yet behind this image of villainy lies a character of extraordinary complexity, one who mastered the Vedas, performed penance for ages, and was blessed by the gods themselves. Ravana was not a simple villain, but rather a paradox, a scholar and a warrior whose devotion and pride wove together to create his fate. His story reveals that Indian mythology rarely offers simple black-and-white portraits of good and evil, but instead provides layered explorations of human nature. Born to the sage Visharava and the demoness Kaikesi, Ravana was a product of two worlds. From his father, he inherited a keen intellect, the ability to master sacred texts, and the capacity for rigorous tapas, or austerity. From his mother, he drew the fierce energy and ambition of the rakshasas, the demon clan. This dual heritage made Ravana both Brahmin and Rakshasa, a scholar with the blood of warriors and Asuras. As a child, he displayed insatiable curiosity, learning the Vedas and Shastras with great discipline and quickly surpassing many in knowledge. Yet this knowledge did not temper his ambition, but sharpened it, fueling his desire to be greater than gods and men alike. Ravana's identity as both a devotee and a demon is central to understanding his myth. Ravana's devotion to Shiva remains one of the most striking aspects of his story. Legends tell that he performed intense austerities for thousands of years, offering parts of his own body as sacrifice until he finally won Shiva's favor. Pleased by his devotion, Shiva granted him extraordinary boons, including near invulnerability against gods and demons, which allowed him to dominate the three worlds. Ravana even composed the Shiva Tandava Stotra, a hymn of profound beauty still recited today. This duality, a demon king who could compose hymns of ecstatic devotion, illustrates the contradictions within him. His spiritual accomplishments were real, yet his misuse of power revealed the dangers of ego unchecked by humility. Indian mythology thus frames Ravana as a warning about how even the most learned can fall if consumed by pride. As king of Lanka, Ravana was a formidable ruler, admired even by his enemies for the splendor of his court and the strength of his armies. Lanka, built of gold by the divine architect Vishwakarma, became a city of unmatched prosperity under his reign. Ravana's governance displayed order, wealth, and grandeur, demonstrating that he was not merely a tyrant, but also a capable administrator. Yet this very success contributed to his downfall, for it intensified his arrogance. He began to see himself not only as a king, but as the rightful ruler of the cosmos. Mythology suggests that Ravana's hubris blinded him to limits, convincing him that even the wives of sages and gods could be taken by force, a belief that ultimately set him on a path toward ruin. The abduction of Sita is the act for which Ravana is most condemned, yet even here his portrayal is not entirely straightforward. In many retellings, Ravana never forced himself upon Sita, instead keeping her in the Ashoka Grove and trying to win her consent. His twisted code of honor dictated that he would not touch her without permission, a peculiar adherence to Dharma within an otherwise adharma-filled act. This contradiction reflects Ravana's complexity. He could justify an abduction as a display of power, yet he restrained himself with rules rooted in both pride and principle. It is this blend of respect and violation, arrogance and discipline, that makes Ravana one of mythology's most enigmatic anti-heroes. The war with Rama is often framed as a cosmic struggle between Dharma and Adharma, with Ravana as the dark force opposing divine order. Yet in certain traditions, Ravana is seen less as a simple villain and more as an instrument of destiny. Some texts suggest that he was cursed to be slain by Vishnu's avatar. Thus his actions were bound to lead to his death at Rama's hands. Others even present him as a devotee who chose this fate consciously, wishing for liberation through divine encounter. These interpretations do not excuse his deeds, but recast them within the larger metaphysical drama of the Ramayana, where even demons can play roles that serve cosmic balance. In this light, Ravana's defiance becomes both his crime and his sacrifice. Ravana's immense learning sets him apart from other villains of mythology. He was a master of the Vedas, the Upanishads, and countless scriptures. He was skilled in music, a veena player whose artistry was said to charm even the gods. He understood astrology, medicine, and military science, making him both sage and warrior. This makes his fall all the more tragic, for it was not ignorance, but arrogance that destroyed him. His knowledge did not protect him from his desires, illustrating a key lesson of Indian mythology. Wisdom without humility becomes self-destructive. In Ravana, we see that intellectual mastery can coexist with moral blindness, a combination far more dangerous than brute strength alone. The image of Ravana has continued to evolve across regions and traditions of India. In many villages, effigies of Ravana are burned during Dussehra, symbolizing the triumph of good over evil. Yet in some places, particularly in parts of South India and Sri Lanka, Ravana is revered as a great king and even a cultural hero. In these narratives, his devotion to Shiva and his accomplishments are emphasized, and his conflict with Rama is viewed as tragic rather than villainous. This diversity of interpretations underscores the flexibility of myth and the way cultural memory reshapes characters to reflect values and histories. Ravana is thus not only a figure of the Ramayana, but also a mirror through which different communities see their own ideals and struggles. The figure of Ravana also resonates in modern discourse, where he is sometimes invoked as a symbol of resistance or as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked power. Some reinterpret him as a misunderstood figure who challenged northern ideals of Dharma, while others see him as an archetype of the brilliant but flawed leader undone by his vices. His ability to inspire both condemnation and admiration testifies to the depth of his portrayal in myth. Unlike one-dimensional villains, Ravana embodies contradictions that remain relevant: devotion and arrogance, wisdom and folly, strength and downfall. He challenges us to see that greatness can turn to ruin when blinded by ego. In the end, Ravana's story is not merely about the defeat of a demon king, but about the fate of one who combined immense knowledge with overwhelming desire. He was a villain who read the Vedas, a scholar who composed hymns, and a warrior who defied the gods. His life illustrates the dangers of mistaking power for destiny and wisdom for invincibility. By placing Ravana at the center of the Ramayana's conflict, Indian mythology presents a figure both fearsome and tragic, a reminder that even the most learned can fall when blinded by pride. His legend remains a testament to the complexity of myth, where villains may wear the robes of scholars and anti-heroes walk the line between devotion and defiance. Part 2. Mahishasura, the shapeshifter slain by Durga. Mahishasura is remembered as the buffalo demon, whose arrogance and ferocity led to the creation of one of the most celebrated goddesses in Hindu mythology, Durga. His story, though ending in his defeat, is not one of simple villainy, but of immense strength, cunning, and the unrestrained pursuit of dominance. Born of an Asura father and a buffalo mother, Mahishasura carried within him both human intelligence and animalistic brute power. This unique heritage made him capable of assuming multiple forms, shifting between man, demon, and beast at will. From the moment of his birth, he was destined to be an extraordinary figure, embodying both the dark vitality of nature and the destructive pride of unchecked ambition. His legend illustrates how power without balance invites destruction, and how even demons serve a purpose in shaping divine narratives. Mahishasura's rise to power began with his penance to Brahma, a deity who often granted boons to demons after long austerities. Mahishasura performed severe tapas, standing unmoving for years, and subjecting himself to hardships until Brahma was compelled to grant him a wish. With clever foresight, Mahishasura asked that no man or god be able to kill him, believing this would make him invincible. Brahma, bound by the rules of boons, granted the request but added the caveat that a woman could still be his destroyer. Mahishasura dismissed this as insignificant, mocking the idea that any woman could match his power. In this arrogance lay the seed of his downfall, for in mythology it is often pride, more than cruelty, that draws the wrath of the divine. With his boon secured, Mahishasura began a conquest that shook the three worlds. He led armies of Asuras against the gods, defeating them in battle and driving them out of heaven. Indra, the king of the gods, was cast down, and the Devas wandered helpless and humiliated. The universe trembled under the reign of Mahishasura, for his shape-shifting powers made him impossible to defeat in combat. When struck down, he could change form, appearing as a buffalo, a lion, an elephant, or a towering demon. Each transformation renewed his strength and confused his enemies. The gods, powerless to resist, sought refuge in Vishnu and Shiva, who combined their energies with the other deities to create a new power that would alter the balance of the cosmos. From this collective energy arose Durga, the warrior goddess whose form radiated both beauty and terror. Each god contributed to her creation. Shiva gave her his trident, Vishnu his discus, Indra his thunderbolt, and other gods their weapons. Mounted upon a lion, Durga embodied the combined force of divinity, a woman created precisely to counter Mahishasura's arrogance. The symbolism was powerful. Where Mahishasura dismissed women as weak and inconsequential, the gods demonstrated that Shakti, the feminine energy, was both primal and supreme. Durga was not merely a goddess of war, but also the personification of cosmic balance, created to restore order where arrogance had brought chaos. The battle between Durga and Mahishasura is described in the Devi Mahatmya with vivid imagery, presenting a cosmic drama of unparalleled scale. For 9 nights and 10 days, Durga fought against Mahishasura's armies, slaying countless demons with her weapons. Each night, the demon king tried to overwhelm her with new forms, charging as a buffalo, roaring as a lion, stomping as an elephant, and rising as a human warrior. Yet each time Durga struck him down, her calm resolve unshaken by his transformations. Finally, when Mahishasura returned to his true buffalo form, she pinned him to the ground, pierced him with her trident, and severed his head with her sword. The slaying of Mahishasura was not just the end of a battle, but the reassertion of Dharma, the victory of cosmic order over chaos. Yet, even in his defeat, Mahishasura is not portrayed as an insignificant figure. His power was immense, his courage undeniable, and his conquest of heaven nearly complete. He was not a cowardly demon hiding in shadows, but a warrior who fought openly, embodying brute strength and unyielding ambition. In this sense, He resembles an anti-hero, not admired for virtue but for his audacity and might. His legend reminds us that demons in Indian mythology are rarely mere monsters. They are often powerful beings who push the boundaries of creation, forcing the emergence of greater divine powers. Without Mahishasura, Durga would not have manifested, and the balance of masculine and feminine energies would not have been so dramatically affirmed. The annual celebration of Durga Puja commemorates this battle, with the goddess worshipped as Mahishasuramardini, the slayer of Mahishasura. In images and idols, she is often depicted with her lion standing triumphantly over the subdued buffalo demon, her weapons striking with divine precision. For devotees, this represents not just the victory of gods over demons, but also the triumph of discipline over chaos, wisdom over ignorance, and humility over arrogance. Mahishasura becomes a symbol of the ego that resists higher truth, while Durga embodies the inner strength required to overcome it. The myth thereby moves beyond historical narrative into spiritual allegory, teaching lessons of balance and surrender. Interestingly, Mahishasura's memory has not been confined to villainy in all traditions. Among certain communities, particularly in parts of Bengal and Karnataka, he is remembered with a degree of respect, sometimes even as an ancestral hero. For some, he symbolizes resistance against invading forces, and his defeat by Durga is reinterpreted through the lens of social and cultural struggles. This diversity of perspectives demonstrates the richness of Indian mythology, where even defeated demons can become icons depending on how their stories are retold. Mahishasura's dual image as both villain and hero reveals how mythology is never static but always alive, shaped by the communities that keep it. The figure of Mahishasura also highlights the importance of shape-shifting in Indian myth, where fluidity of form often reflects the instability of power. His ability to shift between animal and human forms represented the primal chaos that threatened cosmic order, while Durga's unchanging radiance represented the steadiness of Dharma. The struggle between them was therefore not only a physical battle, but also a metaphysical clash between the ever-changing ego and the eternal principle of truth. By defeating Mahishasura, Durga demonstrated that stability, balance, and clarity are ultimately stronger than restless desire and arrogance. The story resonates across centuries as a metaphor for inner battles that each person must face. In the end, Mahishasura's tale remains one of the most dramatic and celebrated in Indian mythology. He was a shapeshifter of immense power, a conqueror of gods, and a demon whose arrogance led to his destruction. Yet through his defiance, he became the catalyst for the emergence of Durga, the supreme goddess who embodies Shakti in its purest form. His defeat was not just the fall of a demon, but the revelation of feminine power as an ultimate force in the cosmos. Mahishasura's legend reminds us that even the strongest of beings are bound by destiny, and that pride in one's invincibility often masks the seeds of downfall. In his rise and fall, he stands as both villain and anti-hero, a figure who reveals the eternal truth that every excess eventually finds its balance. Part 3. Asuras versus Devas. Not always evil versus good. The conflict between Asuras and Devas is one of the oldest and most enduring themes in Indian mythology. At first glance, these stories appear to present a straightforward dichotomy between good and evil, with the Devas representing order, light, and righteousness, and the Asuras embodying chaos, darkness, and wickedness. Yet as one looks closer, the line is not always so clear. The Asuras, often branded as demons, were not uniformly evil, nor were the Devas free of flaws. Many myths reveal Devas acting out of jealousy, greed, or fear, while Asuras at times displayed devotion, courage, and even wisdom. The struggle between these two groups reflects less a moral opposition of good and evil than a deeper cosmic tension between competing forces of nature, culture, and the human psyche. In the earliest Vedic texts, the distinction between Asuras and Devas was not nearly as sharp as it later became. The word Asura originally meant a powerful or divine being, and several gods, including Varuna and Mitra, were once called Asuras in hymns. Only later, as mythology evolved, did Asura take on the meaning of enemy or demon, while Deva came to signify gods aligned with order. This shift reveals that the classification of Devas and Asuras was more about shifting cultural and theological perspectives than about eternal morality. What was considered divine in one context could be considered demonic in another, reminding us that myth reflects human struggles to define the sacred. The rivalry between Devas and Asuras often centered on control of Amrita, the nectar of immortality, as well as dominion over the three worlds. Both groups were born of the same father, the sage Kashyapa, but from different mothers. Aditi gave birth to the Devas, while Diti bore the Asuras. This shared parentage makes them cosmic siblings, locked in eternal competition rather than wholly separate species. Their battles were less about absolute good versus evil, and more about family conflict elevated to a cosmic scale. The Asuras' rebellion against the Devas can thus be read as the struggle of a younger sibling seeking recognition and power, challenging the dominance of the established order. One of the most famous episodes illustrating this complexity is the churning of the ocean, or Samudra Manthan. In this myth, Devas and Asuras temporarily set aside their enmity to churn the ocean of milk in search of Amrita. Using Mount Mandara as the churning rod and the serpent Vasuki as the rope, both sides pulled together to bring forth hidden treasures. Out of the ocean came gems, goddesses, and finally the nectar of immortality. The cooperation between Devas and Asuras demonstrates that their rivalry was not absolute, and that both groups were part of a larger cosmic process. Yet when the nectar finally appeared, deceit entered the scene, with Vishnu taking the form of Mohini to prevent the Asuras from gaining immortality. Here, the Devas' cunning ensured their survival, but it also showed that they, too, could rely on trickery rather than fairness. The Asuras were often depicted as powerful rulers with their own kingdoms, knowledge, and traditions. Figures like Bali, Mahabali, and Prahlada were revered for their devotion, generosity, and dharmic qualities. Mahabali, in particular, is remembered in Kerala during the festival of Onam as a just and noble king who cared deeply for his people. Though he was eventually sent to the underworld by Vamana, Vishnu's dwarf incarnation, Mahabali's legacy endures as that of a ruler who was loved more than the gods themselves. This reveals that Asuras could embody virtues commonly associated with righteousness, complicating the idea that they were always evil. Their conflict with the Devas was often about power and dominance, not morality. Similarly, the Devas were not free of questionable actions. Indra, king of the gods, is frequently portrayed as insecure, envious, and prone to excess. Many myths tell of him fearing the rise of powerful sages or Asuras and taking deceitful measures to thwart them. He disrupted the penance of Tapasvins, stole from rivals, and indulged in pleasures that compromised his dignity. In one story, Indra even slew the Asura Vritra by breaking an oath, a deed considered adharma. These narratives suggest that the Devas, though divine, were not infallible paragons of virtue, but beings with human-like flaws. Their role was to maintain order, but the methods they employed were not always beyond reproach. The Asuras, in turn, were often defined by their ambition and desire to overthrow the Devas, but their quest for power was not inherently evil. In many myths, Asuras practiced intense penance to win boons from Brahma or Shiva, demonstrating discipline and devotion. Their downfall usually came not from their efforts, but from the pride and recklessness that followed success. Ravana, Hiranyakashipu, and Mahishasura all illustrate how tapas and devotion could elevate an asura to godlike power. Yet arrogance and ego eventually brought their ruin. The moral lesson was less about condemning them as demons and more about warning against hubris, whether an asura or deva. This ambiguity has made the Asura-Deva conflict a rich source of symbolism. Some scholars interpret Devas and Asuras as representing forces of light and darkness within the human mind, not strictly good and evil, but competing impulses. Devas symbolize clarity, restraint, and preservation of order, while Asuras embody desire, ambition, and the urge to dominate. Neither side can be eradicated entirely, for both are part of the cosmic and psychological balance. The myths dramatize the necessity of struggle, suggesting that growth and order emerge only through the clash of opposing forces. Even the gods require asuras to test them, and without opposition there would be no dynamism in the universe. Regional traditions further complicate the picture. In South India, particularly among certain communities, asuras like Mahabali are honored as ancestral figures rather than condemned as demons. In these narratives, the Devas appear as envious usurpers, while the Asuras represent rulers who were just and generous. Such reinterpretations show how mythology adapts to cultural memory and political identity, turning supposed villains into heroes, depending on perspective. This flexibility demonstrates that Indian mythology does not offer fixed moral categories, but encourages reflection on the complexity of human and cosmic relations. In the end, the conflict between Asuras and Devas is not a simple story of good triumphing over evil. It is a nuanced exploration of power, pride, devotion, and destiny. Both Devas and Asuras share divine origins. Both seek immortality, and both are capable of virtue and vice. Their endless struggle keeps the cosmos in motion, reminding us that order and chaos are inseparable, that light cannot exist without shadow, and that morality is often a matter of perspective. By portraying asuras as more than monsters and devas as more than saints, Indian mythology reveals that the battle between them lives on within each human being, where clarity must constantly contend with desire. Part 4. Hiranyakashipu and Prahlada, the father who hated God. The story of Hiranyakashipu and his son Prahlada is one of the most poignant and dramatic episodes in Indian mythology, capturing the eternal conflict between arrogance and devotion, tyranny and faith, ego and surrender. Hiranyakashipu, an Asura king of immense power, sought to establish himself as the supreme ruler of the cosmos, above gods and men. Yet his own son Prahlada stood in silent opposition, embodying unwavering devotion to Vishnu. Their conflict was not only political but also spiritual, for it revealed how even within a single family, the deepest tensions of belief and power could emerge. This myth, central to the Bhagavata Purana and other texts, highlights the limits of worldly power when confronted by divine grace, and the courage of a child who defied his father out of love for God. Hiranyakashipu's origins are tied to the cycle of vengeance that often drives mythological narratives. He was the brother of Hiranyaksha, a demon slain by Vishnu in his Varaha avatar. Consumed by grief and rage at his brother's death, Hiranyakashipu turned his hatred toward Vishnu and vowed to destroy him. This animosity was not rooted in ignorance, but in wounded pride, the sense that the Asuras had been wronged and that Vishnu was the obstacle to their supremacy. To achieve his aim, Hiranyakashipu undertook extreme austerities, standing in penance for thousands of years, so still and disciplined that his body was eaten by ants until only his consciousness remained. Pleased by this devotion, Brahma appeared to him, and Hiranyakashipu asked for a boon that would make him nearly invincible. The boon he received was one of the most carefully worded in all mythology. He asked that he should not be slain by man or beast, by Deva or Asura, indoors or outdoors, by weapon or hand, by day or night, on earth or in the sky. Brahma granted the request, making Hiranyakashipu believe himself unconquerable. Empowered by this protection, he conquered the heavens, dethroned Indra, and declared himself the supreme ruler of creation. His arrogance grew so great that he demanded all beings worship him as God. Temples, sacrifices, and prayers were ordered in his name, and the worship of Vishnu was forbidden. For Hiranyakashipu, hatred of Vishnu and worship of himself became the pillars of his reign. It was in this environment of tyranny that Prahlada, his son, grew into a devotee of Vishnu. From his earliest years, Prahlada displayed a serene and unshakable faith, speaking constantly of Vishnu's greatness and encouraging others to surrender to him. Teachers tried to instruct him in politics and power, but Prahlada only responded with hymns to Vishnu. When brought before his father, the boy proclaimed that Vishnu was the Lord of all, not Hiranyakashipu. This enraged the demon king, who could not comprehend how his own son could betray him by honoring his greatest enemy. Thus began the tragic conflict between father and son, a drama that would ultimately reveal the limits of power and the endurance of devotion. Hiranyakashipu tried every means to break Prahlada's faith. He scolded him, reasoned with him, threatened him, and finally turned to violence. The boy was subjected to cruel punishments. He was thrown into pits of snakes, chained and beaten, poisoned, and cast into fire. Each time he emerged unharmed, protected by his devotion to Vishnu. Even when he was placed before charging elephants or hurled into the ocean, Prahlada's heart remained fixed on his god, and Vishnu's grace shielded him from harm. The resilience of the child, his calm joy in the face of suffering, became a testament to the invincibility of true devotion. For Prahlada, no punishment could turn him away from Vishnu, because his love was greater than fear. The climax of the story came when Hiranyakashipu, enraged beyond reason, demanded of his son where Vishnu could be found if he was truly omnipresent. Pointing to a pillar, Prahlada replied that Vishnu was present even there. Striking the pillar in anger, Hiranyakashipu was met not with silence but with a roar that shook the cosmos. From the pillar emerged Narasimha, Vishnu's man-lion incarnation, neither human nor beast, created precisely to bypass the boon that had made Hiranyakashipu feel immortal. At twilight, neither day nor night, Narasimha dragged Hiranyakashipu to the threshold of his palace, neither indoors nor outdoors, placed him on his lap, neither earth nor sky, and tore him apart with his claws, neither weapon nor hand. In this moment, the arrogance of the demon king met its end, undone by the very conditions he thought ensured his immortality. The death of Hiranyakashipu is not simply the fall of a tyrant, but the revelation of divine justice. His arrogance, though rooted in real strength and devotion, blinded him to humility and led him to mistake temporary power for eternal supremacy. His downfall illustrates the truth that no boon can protect one from destiny, and that divine order cannot be permanently overturned by pride. Yet the story also emphasizes the role of Prahlada, whose faith was the true counterpoint to his father's arrogance. Without Prahlada's devotion, Narasimha might not have manifested. It was the boy's unshaken surrender that invited Vishnu's presence into the world. Prahlada, in contrast to his father, is remembered as one of the greatest devotees in Hindu tradition, a child saint whose innocence and determination became a model for bhakti. His defiance of tyranny was not rebellion for power, but an act of love and loyalty to the divine. He represents the truth that devotion can withstand oppression, that spiritual strength can endure even under the harshest conditions. In many retellings, Prahlada later became a wise king himself, ruling with humility and fairness, proving that the seed of righteousness could grow even in the house of a tyrant. His story continues to inspire those who face persecution for their beliefs, teaching that inner strength comes from surrender, not domination. The tale of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlada also reflects a larger theme in Indian mythology, that Asuras are not merely villains, but essential participants in the cosmic drama. Hiranyakashipu's austerities, his rise to power, and his defiance of Vishnu all serve to bring forth Narasimha, a form of the divine that otherwise would not exist. Thus, even his arrogance plays a role in the unfolding of cosmic balance. The Asuras, though often cast as antagonists, become catalysts for divine manifestations, their ambition and pride necessary for the revelation of higher truths. Hiranyakashipu's hatred of God, paradoxically, led to a deeper revelation of God's presence in all things. In the end, the story of Hiranyakashipu and Prahlada is not just about a father and son, but about the eternal battle between ego and devotion, pride and surrender. Hiranyakashipu sought to replace God with himself, demanding worship born of fear, while Prahlada chose devotion born of love. The result was inevitable. Arrogance fell, and faith endured. This myth reminds us that true power lies not in domination, but in surrender, not in boons or armies, but in unwavering devotion to the divine. It stands as one of the most powerful stories of Indian mythology, showing that even in the face of tyranny, the heart that clings to the divine can never be destroyed. Part 5. Vritra the Dragon, Holding Back the Cosmic Waters. Among the many demons who populate Indian mythology, Vritra holds a unique place as both dragon and cosmic adversary. Known as the serpent or Asura, who held back the waters of creation, he represents one of the earliest symbols of obstruction and chaos in the Vedic tradition. His name, meaning, quote, the enveloper or the one who covers, reflects his role as the force that withholds life-sustaining waters, preventing fertility and abundance from reaching the earth. Vritra is often remembered as the enemy of Indra, the king of the gods, whose slaying of the dragon is one of the most significant myths in the Rig Veda. Yet, like other figures in Indian mythology, Vritra is not simply an embodiment of evil, but rather a force that dramatizes the eternal struggle between stagnation and flow, between obstruction and release. The myth of Vritra begins with his rise as a powerful Asura who managed to seize control of the world's waters. In the Vedic worldview, rivers and rains were not merely physical phenomena, but sacred manifestations of divine order. By capturing these waters and withholding them from the earth, Vritra upset the balance of creation, plunging the world into drought and despair. The people, animals, and crops suffered as the rivers stopped flowing and the rains ceased to fall. Vritra's grip over the waters symbolized not only physical drought, but also spiritual stagnation, the withholding of life's essential forces. He was therefore not just a monster but a cosmic principle, the resistance that must be overcome for creation to thrive. To restore order, the gods turned to Indra, the youngest and most dynamic of their leaders. Indra was granted the Vajra, a thunderbolt fashioned by the sage Dadichi's bones, a weapon designed to shatter even the mightiest of foes. Empowered by Soma, the divine elixir, Indra set forth to confront Vritra. The battle between Indra and Vritra is described in hymn after hymn in the Rig Veda, portraying it as a cosmic struggle of thunder and storm against serpent and drought. With his thunderbolt, Indra struck Vritra down, splitting open the dragon's body and releasing the imprisoned waters. Rivers gushed forth, rains fell again, and the world was restored to life. In this way, the slaying of Vritra became a foundational myth of regeneration, symbolizing the victory of dynamic energy over the forces of obstruction. The imagery of this battle resonates far beyond its literal meaning. On one level, it explains natural phenomena, portraying Indra as the storm god who brings rain by conquering the drought-causing serpent. On another, it represents psychological and spiritual truths. Vritra, the enveloper, can be seen as the inner obstacles that hold back growth, fear, ignorance, or attachment, while Indra symbolizes the energy of liberation, breaking open barriers to allow the free flow of life. The myth suggests that progress, whether cosmic or personal, requires the overcoming of forces that constrict and bind. In this sense, Vritra is not merely a villain, but a necessary adversary who makes renewal possible. Yet, the relationship between Vritra and Indra is not always presented in simple terms of good defeating evil. Some hymns hint at a more complex dynamic, where Indra's slaying of Vritra involved trickery or even breaches of cosmic law. Later texts describe Vritra as a devotee of Vishnu, granted protection from death except by specific conditions, which Indra exploited with the help of Vishnu. In certain versions, Indra is said to have killed Vritra not openly but through deceit, and as a result he incurred the sin of Brahmanacide. Burdened by this guilt, Indra had to undergo penance to cleanse himself. Such versions complicate the myth, suggesting that even gods are not beyond moral ambiguity, and that victory often comes at a cost. This complexity casts Vritra in a more nuanced light. If he was a devotee who earned divine favor, his role as antagonist may have been less about malice and more about fulfilling a cosmic function. His withholding of the waters can be interpreted as a stage of containment necessary before release. In agricultural symbolism, this mirrors the cycle of dry and wet seasons, where drought precedes rain and the withholding of waters heightens their eventual abundance. Vritra's obstruction thus becomes part of the larger rhythm of creation, a reminder that even forces of limitation have a place in the cosmic order. His defeat was necessary, but his existence was also essential to the drama of renewal. In many ways, the battle between Indra and Vritra echoes other dragon-slaying myths found across cultures, from Zeus and Typhon in Greek mythology to Thor and Jormungandr in Norse myth. The serpent or dragon often represents primal chaos, while the thunder-wielding god symbolizes order and renewal. Yet the Indian version adds layers of spiritual meaning, linking the release of waters to the flow of cosmic life and the overcoming of inner as well as outer obstacles. Indra's thunderbolt is not just a weapon of destruction, but also a tool of liberation, breaking open what has been bound and allowing vitality to return to the world. Vritra's role as anti-hero lies in his paradoxical significance. He is remembered as the enemy of the gods, the dragon slain by Indra, yet his story cannot be reduced to villainy. By challenging the gods and withholding the waters, he forced the emergence of Indra's heroism and the renewal of life. Without Vritra's obstruction, there would have been no drama of release, no narrative of triumph. His resistance created the conditions for transformation, making him an essential counterpart to the storm god. Like many Asuras, his arrogance and power led to his downfall, but his presence was integral to the cosmic balance. The legacy of Vritra continues to influence Indian thought, particularly in its symbolic dimensions. In rituals and spiritual teachings, the idea of breaking through obstacles to release the flow of life echoes the myth of Vritra. Just as Indra had to summon courage and strength to strike down the dragon, so too must individuals confront their inner Vritras, doubts, fears, and ignorance that block their spiritual growth. The waters held back by the serpent represent not only rivers, but also the deeper currents of consciousness, waiting to be released through courage and clarity. Thus, the myth retains relevance beyond its original context, speaking to the struggles of both nature and the soul. In the end, the story of Vritra the Dragon is not only about a god slaying a demon, but about the eternal cycle of obstruction and release that governs life. Vritra's power to hold back the waters made him a force of cosmic significance, while Indra's triumph ensured the continuation of creation. Their battle reflects the ongoing interplay between limitation and liberation, showing that even demons play a vital role in the unfolding of the universe. Vritra, though defeated, remains a symbol of the challenges that precede renewal, the darkness that gives meaning to light, and the adversary without whom no hero could rise. In his defeat, the waters flowed again and life was restored, affirming that struggle itself is the source of creation's vitality. Part 6. Bhasmasura, the demon who burned himself. The tale of Bhasmasura is one of the most curious and ironic stories in Indian mythology, for it speaks not only of arrogance and power, but also of how self-destruction can follow from unrestrained desire. Unlike many other Asuras who battled gods or conquered the heavens, Bhasmasura's tale is shorter, more contained, yet deeply symbolic. His very name means the ash demon, and it reflects both his power and his end. He was granted a boon by Shiva that allowed him to burn anything he touched upon the head to ashes. This incredible gift, born from devotion and penance, soon turned into a curse, for Bhasmasura's lust and recklessness led him to test his boon in the most dangerous way possible, upon Shiva himself. What followed was a dance of deception, divine intervention, and the ultimate irony of a demon undone by his own gift. Like many Asuras, Bhasmasura attained his power through tapas, the practice of austerities and penances directed toward the gods. He performed intense devotion to Shiva, meditating, fasting, and praying with single-minded dedication. Pleased by his tapas, Shiva appeared before him and offered to grant him a boon. Without hesitation, Bhasmasura asked that whatever head he touched with his hand should be reduced to ashes instantly. Shiva, known for his generosity and often quick to grant boons without fully considering the consequences, agreed. Thus, Bhasmasura acquired a terrifying weapon, one that could bypass armies and protections, reducing even the mightiest beings to dust with a single gesture. Yet instead of using this power with restraint, Bhasmasura quickly revealed his arrogance. Empowered by his new ability, he began tormenting the world. Legends say that he chased women, boasting that he could destroy their protectors with a mere touch, and spread fear among sages and kings. His most audacious act, however, came when he turned his power against Shiva himself. Some versions of the tale describe that, intoxicated with his boon, Bhasmasura grew so arrogant that he attempted to test it on Shiva, reasoning that if he could destroy the very god who had blessed him, he would reign supreme. Suddenly, the boon that had been given as a reward for devotion became a threat even to its divine giver. Faced with his own devotee trying to annihilate him, Shiva fled in alarm. The great ascetic, usually calm in meditation, was forced to run across the universe with Bhasmasura in pursuit, his hand raised and ready to strike the god's head. This scene, both dramatic and ironic, highlights one of the central paradoxes of Indian mythology, that divine generosity can sometimes empower forces of destruction, and that even gods are tested by the unintended consequences of their compassion. Shiva, who grants boons out of kindness, often finds himself entangled in the arrogance of those who misuse them, and Bhasmasura is a perfect example of this tension. It was at this moment of crisis that Vishnu intervened. Assuming the enchanting form of Mohini, the divine maiden, Vishnu confronted Bhasmasura. Mohini's beauty was said to be beyond compare, a vision that even the most disciplined beings could not resist. When Bhasmasura beheld her, he was immediately smitten. Forgetting his pursuit of Shiva, he fell under Mohini's spell and begged her to accept him as her husband. Mohini, with playful cunning, told him that she would only marry him if he could match her in dance. Enthralled, Bhasmasura agreed, and thus began a strange contest where the Asura imitated every move of the divine dancer. The dance became a test not of strength but of subtlety. Mohini raised her hand to her head, and Bhasmasura, eager to match her every gesture, did the same. In his blind imitation, he forgot the terrible power of his boon. The moment his hand touched his own head, he was reduced to ashes, consumed by the very gift he had sought with such fervor. The irony was complete. The boon that gave him power over gods and men became the instrument of his destruction, and his arrogance turned his devotion into folly. Thus Bhasmasura perished, not by battle or punishment, but by his own reckless misuse of power. The story of Bhasmasura has layers of meaning beyond its surface irony. On one level, it is a cautionary tale about arrogance, showing how power obtained without wisdom leads to self-destruction. On another, it illustrates the role of Maya, or illusion, in the cosmic order. Vishnu as Mohini represents the divine ability to use beauty, charm, and deception to defeat forces that brute strength cannot overcome. Where Shiva's generosity created the problem, Vishnu's cunning resolved it, demonstrating the complementary roles of gods in preserving balance. The feminine aspect of divinity, embodied in Mohini, also highlights the theme that arrogance rooted in male desire and aggression can be undone by the very force it underestimates. Bhasmasura himself fits into the broader pattern of Asuras, who are not wholly monstrous, but deeply flawed. His devotion to Shiva was genuine enough to earn him a boon, but his lack of discipline and humility turned that blessing into a curse. Unlike more complex figures such as Ravana or Mahishasura, who ruled kingdoms and fought cosmic wars, Bhasmasura's story is more direct, almost allegorical. He symbolizes uncontrolled desire and the dangers of wielding great power without self-awareness. In many ways, he is less a kingly villain than an anti-hero whose brief blaze of arrogance ended in swift destruction. Culturally, the story of Bhasmasura has endured in popular imagination. In dance and drama traditions, the moment when he touches his head and burns himself is portrayed with both humor and awe, emphasizing the folly of unchecked lust and pride. The tale is also recounted as a reminder of Shiva's generosity and Vishnu's cleverness, two divine qualities that together maintain the balance of the cosmos. In some interpretations, Bhasmasura represents the destructive power of unchecked human impulses, lust, anger, greed, that, if not controlled, consume the very person who harbors them. In the end, Bhasmasura's legend stands as one of the most ironic in Indian mythology. He was a demon who gained power through devotion, but lost everything through arrogance. Granted a gift that could have made him invincible, he turned it against others and finally upon himself, undone by his own recklessness. His pursuit of Shiva and downfall at Mohini's hands remind us that power without wisdom is self-defeating, and that arrogance blinds even the mighty to the dangers of their own actions. Bhasmasura burned himself not because of external enemies, but because of the fire of his own folly, leaving behind a story that continues to caution against the misuse of blessings and the intoxication of pride. Part 7. Redemption Arcs, When Demons Pray. Indian mythology often presents demons not as irredeemable forces of evil, but as beings caught in the cycle of desire, pride, and ignorance. Unlike many traditions where demons are permanently damned, the Asuras and rakshasas of Hindu lore frequently have moments of devotion, repentance, or transformation. These stories reveal that no being is beyond the reach of grace, and that prayer, tapas, and surrender can redeem even those who once opposed the gods. Such redemption arcs give depth to the myths, showing that the cosmos is not divided into permanent camps of good and evil, but rather filled with beings whose choices and realizations shape their destiny. When demons pray, they become not just antagonists but seekers, reminding us that the path to liberation is open to all. One of the most famous examples is the demon king Bali, or Mahabali, whose story is remembered with reverence in Kerala. Though often categorized as an Asura, Mahabali was a noble and generous ruler, beloved by his subjects. His devotion to Dharma and his generosity became so great that he outshone even the Devas, causing them to grow envious and fearful. When Vishnu incarnated as Vamana the dwarf to check Mahabali's power, the Asura king did not resist. Instead, he humbly accepted Vamana's request for 3 paces of land. When Vamana grew to cosmic size and covered the heavens and earth in 2 strides, Mahabali offered his own head for the 3rd. Far from being destroyed, he was blessed by Vishnu and granted the right to return once a year to visit his people, a tradition celebrated as Onam. Mahabali's story illustrates that devotion and humility can redeem even a demon king. Prahlada's tale also belongs in this category, though his father Hiranyakashipu remains remembered for arrogance. Prahlada, born an Asura prince, became one of the greatest devotees of Vishnu. Despite persecution, he held firm in his faith, singing hymns of surrender and love. In some versions, even Hiranyakashipu, in the moment of his death at the claws of Narasimha, is said to have glimpsed Vishnu's true form and attained a kind of liberation through death at divine hands. Here the arc of redemption is not through repentance, but through the unavoidable contact with divinity. The suggestion is that even hatred of God binds one to God, and in the final reckoning, even enemies of the divine may find release through encounter. Ravana, the Rakshasa king of Lanka, also carries elements of redemption within his legend. Though condemned for abducting Sita and opposing Rama, he was a great devotee of Shiva, a scholar of the Vedas, and a composer of the Shiva Tandava Stotra, a hymn still chanted with reverence. Some traditions hold that his death at Rama's hands was not merely punishment, but liberation, for dying by the hand of Vishnu's avatar was itself a blessing. Certain retellings suggest that Ravana's enmity toward Rama was part of a divine plan, a curse from a past life that ensured his eventual return to the divine source. His prayers to Shiva and his final confrontation with Rama frame him not as an eternal villain, but as a soul whose journey, however tragic, ended in liberation. Even figures like Vritra, the serpent who held back the waters, are sometimes described as devotees caught in circumstances beyond their control. Later retellings describe Vritra as protected by Vishnu due to his piety, with Indra compelled to kill him only through divine intervention. After his death, Vritra is said to have been released from the cycle of rebirth. Similarly, Mahishasura, though slain by Durga, is sometimes reimagined in folk traditions as a figure who sought liberation through his destined encounter with the goddess. These variations remind us that myths often preserve multiple layers, some emphasizing villainy, others hinting at deeper spiritual purposes. The motif of demons gaining redemption through prayer or devotion is also prominent in Puranic stories of Asuras, who undertake tapas to gain boons. Even when their motives were selfish, their austerities often pleased gods like Brahma or Shiva, demonstrating that sincere effort in tapas could yield divine recognition, no matter the being's nature. Sometimes these very penances were the seeds of redemption, for they connected the Asura to the divine, even if their pride later led to downfall. Their prayers, though tainted with ambition, still revealed the universal accessibility of the divine to all creatures. Another striking example is the tale of Gajendra, the Elephant King. Though not a demon in the strict sense, his struggle with a crocodile and his final surrender to Vishnu illustrate the same principle, that when beings in distress call upon God with sincerity, grace descends regardless of past deeds. By extension, even demons who cry out in devotion can find release. The mythology emphasizes that prayer, whether born of arrogance, desperation, or love, always creates a link between the soul and the divine. For demons, these moments of prayer often mark the turning point from bondage to liberation. The presence of redemption arcs in the stories of demons also reflects a deeper philosophical principle in Hindu thought. The universe is governed not by permanent dualities of good and evil, but by karma, dharma, and the possibility of moksha. Every being, whether deva, asura, or human, is caught in the cycle of samsara, and every being has the potential for liberation. Demons who fall are often those who allowed pride to blind them, but their devotion, even when flawed, points to their underlying connection to the divine. When they pray, even if only at the threshold of death, they remind us that grace can transform the darkest of beings. In the end, the redemption arcs of demons reveal the compassionate inclusivity of Indian mythology. Mahabali's humility, Prahlada's devotion, Ravana's hymns, and even Vritra's hidden piety show that no soul is beyond divine reach. Their prayers, whether whispered in penance, sung in defiance, or spoken in surrender, carry the same power as those of gods and sages. By granting redemption to demons, mythology affirms that the divine responds not to status or species, but to sincerity. When demons pray, they cease to be merely villains. They become seekers, showing that the path to liberation is universal, and that even in the darkest hearts, the light of devotion can rise.